quite a disappointing season for the Portland Trailblazers. They missed the playoffs for the first time in probably like 6 years, believe it or not. So 4 big headlines for Portland. So for Damian Lillard, early on in the season, like when it commenced, he was struggling. He wasn't really looking like himself. He didn't have the same burst getting to the rim, and he was just kind of struggling from outside, and those are the 2 key things for Dame being an elite offensive weapon. But it was obvious he wasn't the same player. I think he was just trying to play through like a lingering abdominal strain or something, and obviously it wasn't going away, so he ended up, I think, playing like the first month. He ended up having to get abdominal surgery. After that, he was out for a while, and the Blazers struggled, so there was really no point of him coming back. So they ended up shutting him down for the remainder of the season. Next, moving to CJ, he's gone. He was on the Pelicans, and he played really well there, especially in the playoffs, until he got eliminated. But the Blazers opted to trade him away, ending the dynamic duo of Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum. I mean, we've been talking about the end of this duo for the past 5 years, but I guess I just never thought it would happen until it happened. They opted to trade him, and they got back Josh Hart. They got back, I think, like some second round picks from New Orleans. I think like another young prospect from New Orleans as well, but they didn't, at face value, they didn't get the biggest haul, but for a reason that we'll talk about later, we'll see why the trade was actually decent. But yeah, CJ's gone. And I think the main motivator for them making the trade was the fact that they were having a bad year. If there was a time to trade away CJ McCollum, it would be this year, because I don't think they would have ever traded away CJ McCollum if the Blazers were still hovering around a 4 or 5 seed. That's just the mindset of general managers of small market teams. If they're going to be a playoff team, they're not going to blow it up. And this year, obviously, the Blazers were not going to be a playoff team. The chance to blow it up for them was this year. And I think the second big motivator was, or the reasoning behind the trade was so that the Blazers could have more cap space in free agency to add some marquee guys that might better fit Damian Lillard. Because they obviously didn't get a star in return. This was more a cap space move for them. The Blazers blew it up even more, not just trading away CJ, but trading away Norman Powell, Robert Covington, and Larry Nance. So they traded away CJ and Norm, which were their 2 best scorers on the year, with Damian Lillard being out. And they traded away Larry and Rocco, the defensive-minded veterans. Coming into the season, we knew these were supposed to be the big defensive impactors on the team, Rocco and Larry Nance, because the Blazers have always had needs on the defensive end. But I wasn't really sure that they were going to impact defense that much, and that was obviously the case, as they were the worst defense in the league. So they offloaded those guys and got some second round picks in return, and Keon Johnson from the Clippers, I'm pretty sure, and they got Eric Bledsoe as well, which is just a big contract. I'm pretty sure they're going to try and get off that. But after talking about so much disappointment for Portland, let's talk about the positives. Josh Hart and Anthony Simons. Now, Anthony Simons saw a lot more opportunity with Damian Lillard being injured, and then Norman Powell and CJ McCollum being shipped out. The backcourt was pretty much freed up for him, and he came into a starting role, and he was able to produce. Blazers fans have been talking about Simons' potential for the past 3 years, and this year he was finally able to showcase it, especially on the offensive end with more opportunity. And then Josh Hart, he came over in the CJ trade, and I don't think Portland thought they were going to be getting a 20-point per game scorer in Josh Hart when they got him. Like, he also had more opportunity on ball instead of just being somebody to fit into an offense and play off of playmakers and ball handlers. He was a main ball handler for Portland when he came over, and he was able to put up some major production. Now we can specifically talk about some players for Portland, starting with the top performers. Damian Lillard, obviously early season struggles, didn't look like Dame. He tried to struggle through injuries, but he got shut down for the remainder of the season. He's still this team's franchise player. He's loyal. Everybody knows that. I don't know if his patience is finally growing thin. Like, he's I think 33 years old. Sorry, he's 31 years old, so he's probably got 4 or 5 more years left of his prime. He hasn't won a championship yet, hasn't really been that close. Like, he got to the Western Conference Finals that one year, but he wasn't. Nobody viewed the Trailblazers of having a chance to advance, so I don't know if he's still patient that Portland's going to be able to put a winning team around him, but he's still their franchise player, and until Dame officially says that he wants to be traded, I'm going to believe that he wants to stay in Portland. Next is Jusuf Nurkic. He's always been their low post finisher. He's never really been the most efficient guy from 2-point range, but he had his most efficient year thus far. He had a field goal percentage of 53.5%, which was the highest in his career, and he was putting up 15 points per game, rebounding at a high level as well. Though his season was also cut short due to a foot injury, and there is really no more point of playing him with the team not seeing success. He was the third member of Portland's quote-unquote Big Three, with him, CJ, and Dame, and he was on a very team-friendly contract until now. He's going to be entering unrestricted free agency. Next is Josh Hart. I alluded to him earlier. He was a 3-and-D slashing young role player until this season. That was his role in his Lakers days and his role for his first season in New Orleans. But without Zion in New Orleans this year due to injury, he got more on-ball duties and he was able to showcase more of his playmaking, but his on-ball duties went to a whole other level after his trade to Portland, and so did his production, dropping 20 points per game, 4 assists, and 5 rebounds on 50% from the field and 37% from 3. After this season, he has 2 years on his contract with a player option for the last, and he's making $13 million per year for those 2 years. So that's a very team-friendly contract given his production. It would be in the best interest of Portland to keep him definitely for next season. Moving to the prospects, there's one that I only want to talk about, and that's Anthony Simons. His strengths are his athleticism, his ball handling ability, and his scoring. Now, Anthony's been talked about by Blazers fans for the past 4 years, and he never really got a true chance to showcase his full playing level until this season, like I said, due to injuries and trades of star players. It's obvious the dude has ability as a shot creator because of his handle. He's able to create from downtown. Only 65% of his threes were assisted on, all the others were from his own creation. And he's pretty much able to create a shot on all 3 levels of the court, not just outside. He's able to attack the rim and finish at a decent level, and he's pretty confident in the mid-range marks as well. Without Dame, CJ, and Norm, Anthony was really the dude to create offense for Portland throughout the year until Josh Hart came over. Now, his weaknesses are somewhat similar to CJ McCollum's weaknesses: size and defense in the backcourt. Because, like the duo of Dame and CJ was always going to be limited on the defensive end because both guys were 6'2", 6'3", and not very great on the defensive end. Anthony Simons is also 6'3", and he's a bit slimmer than, he's a lot slimmer than CJ. So he's going to have to work on just being a better defender. He has more athletic capability than CJ, so he has a higher ceiling on the defensive end than him, but you just got to get the mental aspect of it so he can better play next to Damian Lillard in the backcourt. So what's going to determine his ceiling with the Portland Trailblazers is going to be his ability to gel with Damian Lillard once they really play together in the same backcourt, and then his development on the defensive end. Looking to the offseason, Portland can have a pick anywhere from 1 to 8. That is their likely pick range. I have 4 good players for them to target: Chet Holmgren, Keegan Murray, Benedict Mathurin, and AJ Griffin. So starting with Chet, this would especially be if they got lucky and were able to get into the top 3 or top 4. I think if they got lucky, Chet is the best player for them to target because they're such a bad team defensively, for number 1. And Chet was a high-level rim protector at Gonzaga, getting like 3 blocks per game or something crazy like that. I'm not saying Chet is going to be like such a fucking impactful defender out the gate, but I think he will be a better defender than Jusuf Nurkic out the gate. That's my opinion. And in bringing in Chet Holmgren, they can let Nurkic walk and not feel as bad about it, and they can use that money somewhere else in free agency to focus on some of their other needs. So if they got lucky, adding Chet would be in their best interest because they can get a high-level defender at the 5 and not really worry about losing Nurkic in free agency too much. but they're probably not going to launch into the top 3. So Keegan Murray is the next best guy to target. He's somebody that can come in and gel and play off of Damian, Anthony, Josh Hart, Nurkic if they kept him, and just fit in at that power forward position or at the 4 position. I think he can be an immediate plug and play guy and just fit in, play off of everybody, space the floor, be a versatile defender at the 4 position, and that's something that Portland needs. They need a lot more versatile defenders. The last 2 players are wings, one being Benedict Mathurin, really good 3-and-D wing from Arizona, one of the best shooters, a good defender, a really good off-ball guy in terms of getting open on the perimeter off-ball and cutting back door opportunistically. Definitely would be great off the bench, being a marksman off the bench, because Portland wasn't a great shooting team, mainly because Dame and all their shooters were traded away, but Benedict would be a good guy to add to really be that bench marksman. And then AJ Griffin is one of the better wing defenders. He's a better defender than Mathurin, and he's a high level 3-point shooter. He shot plus 40% from 3 at Duke. He projects to be able to guard all 3 positions in the NBA, and yeah, he'd be a high level perimeter defender for Portland to have off the bench as well. Now looking to free agency, I talked about Nurkic. I didn't talk about Anthony. So he was on his rookie contract, and that contract's over, so he's going to be a restricted free agent going into the offseason. He had his best year of his career, so he's proving that potential and that belief that a lot of fans had in him was correct. So he's going to be a hot commodity in the market. Now, Portland can match any contract that's thrown his way. Ideally, Anthony doesn't get a big-time bag from another team, because that's going to really eliminate all the cap space that was created from the CJ McCollum trade, and that was the main reason for making the CJ trade. If Anthony gets a big-time bag from another team and Portland matches it, that's going to be a lot of their cap space gone. So, alluding to that cap space, at face value, it's $29 million. Without re-signing Nurkic and Simons, their cap space is $29 million. In terms of player needs, they pretty much need everything besides a franchise player. They need shooting, they need a lot of defense, maybe a rim protecting center. So these are the guys I have that they should target. Gary Harris, high level 3-and-D wing from Orlando, displayed or reestablished a lot of his value that was lost, mainly because of his streaky shooting. He was really good shooting the ball from outside this year. Still a good defender, would be great to have off the bench. Taurean Prince, same thing, versatile 3-and-D wing, displayed a lot of value for Minnesota, especially in the playoffs. He even showcased a lot of shot creation for Minnesota in the playoffs in that series against the Grizzlies. He was creating from mid-range, hitting some tough fadeaway middies from the elbow. I had never seen Taurean Prince play like that. So, and it's not like he's this old veteran. He's 25, 26 years old. Serge Ibaka, though he is getting older, he can still provide and produce as a rim protecting stretch 5. But a higher value and higher upside rim protecting stretch 5 for Portland to add would be Mo Bamba. Now this would be the ideal player to add if they don't get lucky and get Chet Holmgren in the top 3, and they don't want to add or bring back Jusuf Nurkic. If you had to ask me right now, is Mo Bamba returning to Orlando? I'd say no. I think a team is going to target him in free agency, and Portland could be one of those teams, because they could really use a more impactful defensive center, especially one that can stretch the floor like Mo Bamba. They probably have to give him around $15 million to get him away from Orlando, but like I said, they could afford that, especially if they let Nurkic walk. Bruce Brown would be a great pickup due to his defense. He's improved as a playmaker in his last years in Brooklyn, and he's also a more reliable shooter, especially in the corner. But the main thing for adding Bruce Brown would be for his defensive versatility. And lastly, Dennis Schroeder. Even though him and Damian Lillard have had some history, it would be a good pickup to be to kind of replace Anthony Simons. If Anthony Simons moves to the starting lineup, Dennis Schroeder would be the new bench engine, the bench shot creator at the point guard position. Now in terms of the offseason trade market, I feel like they're going to have to trade Eric Bledsoe to really make the most out of this offseason, because he's making $16 million. He's making $18 million a year, so that's a perfect contract to match with the contract of another maybe star that's on the trade market or on the trade block for another team. So that 18 million is really eating into the cap space of Portland. So if they were able to offload him for maybe a second round pick from a contending team or something, well, yeah, that would be a good move for them to create more cap space in free agency, or they could match that contract with that of a star player that another team wants to move on from. So for that reason, he's the only player I have on the trade block for Portland. As for targeting, I have a couple interesting names: Christian Wood, Jeremy Grant, and Julius Randle. Now, I said it in my Houston Rockets offseason outlook. I think it's likely that Wood is traded in the offseason. He's making, I think, 20 million a year with like 1 year left. So that pretty much matches up with Eric Bledsoe. If I don't know the Blazers draft pick situation, but if they were able to add on some draft picks, maybe the Rockets would view that as a good trade if they really don't want Wood in their long-term plans and just want more draft capital. Pretty much the same philosophy could be applied to Jeremy Grant from Detroit, but I don't think Detroit's going to trade Jeremy Grant. That's just my sneaking suspicion. And then for Julius Randle, I don't think the Knicks like Julius Randle anymore. I know Knicks fans don't really like Randle anymore. This was a tough season for Randle and the Knicks. He's kind of limiting the ceiling of what the Knicks can reach. Like, with Randle as their best player, they're always going to have a chance of making the playoffs. You know, they still have RJ Barrett, Obi Toppin's developing, Emmanuel Quickley's developing, they got Mitchell Robinson. Well, I think they got to re-sign him this year, but they got a lot of other hard-nosed defenders, and they compete really hard, but their ceiling is really limited for Randle being their number one player. So they might want to move on from him and his contract. Maybe they don't think that's a good contract for them anymore. So yeah, he may be on the market, and that may be a star for the Blazers to add via an offseason trade. As for my predictions, I only have two. I think the Blazers are going to draft Keegan Murray. I don't think they're going to get lucky and launch into the top 3. So at like the 6, 7, or 8 range, the best player for them to target would be Keegan Murray. Versatile 4-man, can stretch the floor, defend a lot of positions. I'm going to say that the Blazers trade for Christian Wood. One way or another, I think they will. He plays a lot of power forward, but his best position is at the 5 position. They could add that Eric Bledsoe contract, and maybe they trade the 2022 pick. Maybe not. Maybe they trade a couple of, like a future first round pick in like 2025 and some second rounders. Hell, maybe they even trade Josh Hart. Like, I don't know. There's a lot of different ways for the Blazers to add Christian Wood, and I think they might prioritize that. Letting Nurkic walk, adding somebody that can create offense from the 5 position, stretch the floor better from the 5 position, still improving on the defensive end. Actually, no, I'm going to retract that statement. The Blazers will not trade for Christian Wood. His defense is a bit mid, at best. He's inconsistent on the defensive end. So instead, I'm going to say that they trade for Julius Randle. But the same thing applies. They can attach some draft picks, hopefully for the future. They probably should keep this 2022 pick if possible. Attach some future picks, the Eric Bledsoe contract. Maybe Keon Johnson is enticing for the Knicks. That might be a decent enough package for them to get off that contract, or to want to get off that contract. And Randle's an improved defender. He's a really good versatile defender at the 4 position. He can play some small ball 5. So I think that trade could make sense for the Blazers. For the first time since Damian Lillard's rookie season, the Portland Trailblazers missed the playoffs. On the surface, it sounds incredibly hard to believe, but Portland's been one of the most consistent teams over the past 8 years. The length of their playoff streak. The disappointment isn't entirely their fault. Dame was plagued by injuries, Carmelo was a scorer from a season ago that was lost in free agency, so they no longer had an elite high-powered offense that they could rely on, but they still had the league's worst defense, which is something they wouldn't be able to get away with this year. Once it was realized that this season was lost, the Blazers front office used it as a reason to make their most impactful transaction during the Damian Lillard era. Not only offloading win-now role players like Rocco and Norm, but also trading CJ McCollum, ending the long-term backcourt partnership. The bright signs of the season were Anthony Simons having his best year as a pro after finally seeing time as a starter, and Josh Hart displaying high offensive output after seeing an enhanced role upon his Portland arrival. One of the biggest motives for the CJ trade was to clear up cap space to add a star this offseason. There aren't that many of those in free agency, so I'd assume the Blazers front office was trying to make it easier to trade for one in the offseason. At face value, Portland has roughly $29 million in cap space, though we assume a lot of that will be ate up by re-signing Anthony Simons. Nurkic is also a free agent, but if the Blazers want to make a big-time move, it might have to come at the cost of the Bosnian big man. In the trade market, some enticing options in my opinion are Christian Wood, Jeremy Grant, and Julius Randle. In the draft, the Blazers should have a pick around 7 or 8, in which I think Keegan Murray is the best option, a highly versatile defensive foreman with floor spacing ability. Everyone knew that the only way to raise the ceiling of this team would be through trading CJ McCollum. Now that's done, but what's more important is what the Blazers do to follow this act. Damian Lillard turns 32 this summer. With maybe 4 or 5 years left in his prime, the time to contend with him as your franchise player is running out. For Dame's sake, to reward his unwavering loyalty, Portland has to act fast.